It's a Navy SEAL kind of way of saying that.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another week of Skill Series Live. We're here this week with Carleigh Fairchild, and Dustin's gonna fill you in a little bit more on who she is and why she's here.
And action. I don't see anybody popping up yet, Nick. Are we sure everything is pushed through properly?
Yes, I mean it says live.
Got some viewers popping through. Cool. All right. Well, I guess I'll go ahead and introduce Miss Carleigh Fairchild. All right. So what you may know Carleigh from her time on the TV show Alone from the History Channel. That show is still going on, and she's been on there 2 times. You were on season 3 and 5. 3 she almost won, really closely almost won. How many days were you on there, Carleigh?
I was on for 86 days.
86 days, surviving out in the wilderness with only a bare essentials and wit and baskets. And so Carleigh's done that. She's very passionate about basketry. She's been doing it over 20 years, exploring all kinds of different techniques and materials, and always adapting what she has on hand. Her craftiness with natural materials is truly something to behold. In this skill series, she's going to explain some of the basket techniques and various materials that to get you started on crafting your own baskets. And I should also point out that not only do you make baskets, you teach basketry. You go to different events and gatherings and teach basketry, and you also sell baskets. You have an Etsy, and I'll be dropping the links in the comments, as well as putting the links in the in any kind of descriptions that we have on YouTube or Facebook. And you sell baskets on Etsy as well. What's up, Nick?
Can I do a quick intro here? As far as this series goes, anybody that's watching live with us, you can watch live on Facebook or YouTube. These will be available after on a playlist as well. But if you have questions or comments for Carleigh, go ahead and just leave them in the Facebook. You have to be watching on the actual live video. If you're watching it embedded in our webpage, the little help button down in the corner is not tied to this at all. That'll get you chatting with Noelle in the other room of Dustin's office over there.
No, she's right here.
All right, she's just gonna ignore those messages anyway because she's hanging out here with us. So yeah, use the Facebook comments and the YouTube comments. See some people commenting already. So that's where you'll ask questions, and then we can bring them up on the screen just like this, and Carleigh gets to see that Darren says super awesomeness. So that's how this is all gonna work. Be interactive with it, ask questions, and we'll pass them on to Carleigh when she gets a chance.
Yeah.
We have, whoop, this way. Case. Hey. Yeah, that way. No. That
hey, everybody. It's all right. You know, redheaded stepchild up here.
Yeah. So this event is all hosted and broadcast by Wazoo Survival Gear and Georgia Bushcraft with the intent of sharing knowledge for independent learning and living. So without further ado, Carleigh, take the stage.
Well, thank you very much, Wazoo and Georgia Bushcraft, for putting this all together and inviting me on today. Like Dustin said, I've been making baskets for 20 years, and my passion started as a teenager when I went to some summer camps for survival skills and first saw people making baskets. And I was fascinated by being able to take natural materials and weave them together to make a really useful container. Baskets have been around for at least 12,000 years. There's some carbon dated baskets that were found in Egypt. And it's believed that they've probably been around 20 or 30,000 years even. Baskets were around before pottery. And if you look around your daily life, look at all the different bags and boxes and containers you use. And all of those used to be made out of baskets. Baskets can come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes, from little tiny individual egg baskets all the way up to laundry baskets. And really, baskets Their shape and size and use is only limited by your imagination. So with baskets, there are kind of 4 main styles of basketry. That is ribbed, coiled, plated, and wicker baskets. For example, a coiled basketry is made from usually fine materials, grasses, pine needles, whale baleen can be used as well. And it's essentially sewn together layer by layer. Ribbed baskets are one of the most, in my opinion, diverse baskets for survival, and are characterized by these ribs running the length of them. The third style of basketry is plaited baskets, which you might be familiar with this type by being called like a checker weave, because it's an over-under. And again, very versatile. You can make square baskets, you can make lids. You can also, I don't have that one here. You can turn plated basketry into like a diagonal basket. It just depends on how you use the materials. And then wicker baskets are something that are really common and often made out of willow. In fact, the word wicker kind of stems, the etymology of that stems from willow.
That's pretty cool. I had never heard that before.
Yeah.
Wow.
So as you can see, there's the different styles of baskets. And then you might wonder, like, what materials can you find, and how do you know if a material is good for baskets? My rule of thumb for basket material is, number one, make sure it's not a poisonous material. Like, you don't want to use poison ivy for your baskets. And I see the question, what is my favorite material? It really depends on what I want to make. However, across the board, my favorite material is cedar bark. And that's the inner bark, or the cambium layer. And you pull it off in big strips. And then I use a leather stripping tool to get it down to different sizes, from like 1 inch to 1/4 inch. And then I can make a variety of different baskets out of that bark. For example, my cedar backpack, I wove out of cedar bark, some thicker 1 inch bark, and then kind of plaited together in a flat braid for the handles.
That's amazing. Well, and so all along here, you've been referencing baskets, and that's kind of the key of this class. But even outside of carrying containers, you've made other things, correct? Like your hat that's back there behind you.
I'm like, what other carrying containers? Yeah, I have my cedar hat, which is great. When it's raining, the material actually swells up in the rain, and then the water sheds off. And it's my own design, but is like, I looked at a bunch of Northwest native basketry to pick up on some patterns. Yeah, cedar, this is the time of year to harvest cedar bark. You know, with all basketry materials, you want to approach it as a caretaker. Like, you don't want to go in and just like cut down a whole cedar tree and harvest the bark. My suggestion is to go in and find, like, if you're already going to be clearing some land, sure, go ahead and clear the land, cut down a tree, harvest all of the bark. But if you're harvesting from a live tree, you'll want to just harvest like a narrow strip of it and pull it up the length of the tree. And there's a book I highly recommend for cedar bark basketries that's just titled Cedar. And it goes in depth into descriptions of how to harvest the cedar bark and how to prepare it for use.
Let me see if I can bring that book up. I'm going to try and share screen. Or Nick, would you help me with the sharing of my, never done that.
You should be able to do it from there.
Okay, share screen. 1 second, Carleigh. Let me actually bring up that book.
Okay, you pull it up.
Okay. Chrome tab and quick share.
Hey.
That worked, huh? So there it is on old Amazon. Cedar Tree of Life to the Northwest Coast Indians by Hillary Stewart. Cool. And then back at you, Carleigh.
Back at me. Yeah, so Cedar is an amazing book. I'm not sure if you had the comment.
What's the biggest basket you've made?
The biggest basket I've made would, I don't know if everybody would say that it was entirely a basket, but the shelter I made on a loan in Patagonia, I wove its walls like a basket.
You lived in a basket.
So that was the largest basket.
Well, then this seems like an appropriate follow-up.
Thank you, Jordan. Aside from that, the largest basket I've made is my laundry basket out of willow. So,
That's cool.
and then the smallest basket I've made is this little tiny, fits one egg inside of it.
I always wondered how to carry my one egg.
As I'm saying that, I actually remember I made like thimble-sized baskets for a pair of earrings for a gift once. I made those.
Wow. That's cool that you can take the basic fundamentals and just apply it on pretty much any scale.
For sure. So speaking of fundamentals, like back to materials, how do you find materials to use? And I literally went into my backyard this morning and gathered some materials just to show some of the qualities that we're looking for. You know, you might see a long, straight stalked plant and think that that could be useful. And the things that you want to test for in basketry material is flexibility and then strength. So if I want to bend this, it just breaks. So this isn't a good material to use. Perhaps if it was dried out, then it might have more flexibility after being rehydrated. But as is, this is not a good material.
Is there a set, like I know you kind of bent it over there. Is there a set amount of bend that you're looking for? Do you want to be able to loop it into a circle? What's your goal of the flexibility?
When testing for flexibility, I test for into a circle. Although that's not critical depending on what style of basket you're making. Like if you're making a willow basket.
Dustin is not flexible.
Yeah.
You don't need to have it be able to bend into a perfect circle, but it does need to have flexibility.
Okay.
I harvested some daylily, which is green. And when green wants to like break at the thicker part here, but has some flexibility in the thinner end, where is it? If you harvest the daylily leaf that's browned and yellow at the base, or you were to let the green leaves dry out first, it has tons of flexibility. Like I can just wrap this around.
Oh, wow.
And it's also pretty strong.
And so that's while it's still kind of dead but yellow. And I guess if it gets further than that, if it gets too dry, it'll go back to crispy again.
Right. It's finding that balance of it's dead and dried out. And it's raining here, so this has actually been rehydrated. This would be excellent for twining in your basket, or for if you're making a ribbed basket. This would be great for making the God's Eye with to tie everything together.
What is that part called?
It's called a God's Eye.
God's Eye. Okay.
Yeah.
And Carleigh, when collecting these materials and trying to maybe if you're out testing for the flexibility, is there anything, and this is something that's alive, say it's a stock plant or a willow, is there ones that are being in the sun versus shade? Is there a certain time of the day you collect that changes any of those dynamics?
Certainly where you collect is going to change the dynamics and the time of year. Like in the wintertime, plants tend to be more brittle because the sap is not running through them and they're really cold. In the springtime, the sap is running and they have more flexibility.
Is that why you were saying the cedar is good to harvest right now? Is because it's got the sap running?
Yeah, because the sap is running, the bark will actually separate away from the tree easier than later on in the year, because that cambium layer slowly becomes the next growth ring of wood. So if you were trying to harvest in the fall, part of that cambium layer is already becoming wood and sticking to the tree.
Okay.
So, and a lot of, like if you're making long-term baskets, you want to harvest the material and then let them completely dry out. The recommendation for cedar bark is to let it cure for 6 months before using it.
Oh, wow.
But of course, like in any situation, you have to adapt to what's on hand and what do you need. So if you're in a survival situation or you're out and you suddenly found a whole bunch of some berries you want to harvest, like go ahead and experiment and make a quick survival basket. And then just know that that may not be great long term. You know, this basket I showcased a minute ago, this I harvested green from bittersweet growing last spring. And it's pretty like, there's a lot of space in it. And it's also still very.
Hold on just a second, Carleigh. It looks like we're having some signal issues. Frozen with your basket.
Dumb internet.
She said she's got a storm coming through there, so it might just be weather issues. All right. Okay, I think we're back.
Awesome.
Jonathan Frisbee is wondering, we mentioned that God's eye part on the corner of the basket there. I don't know if that's pertinent to all baskets, but what are some terms or descriptions of the various basket parts? If we want to sound like we know what we're talking about when we go attend our first basketry event.
That's a great question, Jonathan. Terms of baskets. You have the base of a basket, which is always the bottom part of your basket. You have the sides of the basket and you have the rim. And there's a lot of different styles of rims that are on baskets. You know, on this cedar box I have, the rim of the basket is just tucked in and folded down, versus like on this willow basket, there's intricate fold weave that's happening. And then on a basket like my cedar backpack, the rim, this style rim is called a lash flip fold rim. And that is literally giving you the steps to make that rim style. A God's eye is pertinent only to the ribbed baskets, and they can look different. This is a modified God's eye that just doesn't have the fourth angle on it compared to this one.
Nice. And those, I guess, also don't necessarily have a defined base to them because of their shape.
Right, because they're intended to hang. You don't start at the base like you do in most baskets. You actually start at the edges and then work your way in. Other terms for basketry, you've got your warp and your weft, or your spokes and your weavers. So this is a basket I'm working on right now, a Sally bag, and these coming up are my spokes. So whatever is vertical in your basket are the spokes, and then the part that is weaving in between them are your weavers, in this case, yarn. And that's true, you know, in this style basket, you still have your spokes that are the vertical elements, and then the piece that you're weaving across.
Okay. And they said some other words in there, weft and warp.
Warp and weft. I honestly get confused in warp and weft. Warp, I believe, is the vertical, the spokes, and the weft is what you're weaving in between. There are older terms that aren't used as commonly anymore. Yes, some general tips on making baskets, no matter what your material is again to allow any fresh material to dry out and then rehydrate it. And it depends how long to let it dry is going to depend on your materials. So things like cattails might dry out really quickly. And then they also will hydrate quickly. So cattails, you only need to rehydrate maybe for 5 or 10 minutes. And then something like willow, you're going to have to let that rehydrate potentially for a couple of days. So,
wow.
Because the structure of the willow is that it's wood, and moisture travels through wood from one end and then up to the top. It doesn't really absorb very much from the sides. So when
you're saying willow, you're talking kind of the thin sapling branches. That's the part of willow you use?
Yeah.
Okay. And even though you might harvest it green off of the tree, you still want to let it dry, then rehydrate it to work it into a basket.
That's the preference for long-term baskets. If you need to make something quick, you can definitely make one right off the tree if it's flexible.
Okay.
Yeah. In basketry, there's not a lot or necessarily any hard and fast rules about what works and what doesn't work, at least from my perspective. You find materials that might work and you try to make a basket out of it. Different vines. You can use English ivy, some ivy from my yard. And the long runners are great because they're thin, they're flexible, and you can make your hoops out of them. And if I were to make this into a basket, I'd probably go ahead and take off all these leaves, because they're going to fall off eventually on their own.
And so of the various methods of baskets that you've talked, is there one that's particularly easier for beginners or people that are just wanting to give it a try?
The ribbed basket is a great beginner basket. It's a little bit simpler to make because there is not a rim to finish off. In a ribbed basket, you start with the most difficult part, which is the God's eye, which, just to give a quick verbal description, to make it is you hold one piece in, you go around one spoke and then across to the next spoke, and you go around that. And when I say spokes in this case, I'm meaning the two hoops that form the initial part of your basket. For example, here.
Oh, nice. Okay.
This is what a ribbed basket starts as, is just two hoops and then lashing them together at the end. And while the God's eye is one way to do it, any way that you can make it connect is going to work. In basketry, you've got functionality and you've got beauty. And one does not mean that the other doesn't exist, but it also doesn't mean they both have to exist. For a basket to be functional, it doesn't have to be beautiful. And when you're making a survival basket, it maybe isn't going to be beautiful, at least initially.
Jonathan Frisbee's wondering what kind of tools, if any, do you need?
Tools, it's good to have a knife. I have my trusty Carleigh Fairchild signature knife that I use for my basketry.
And where might those be available?
These are available on CarleighFairchild.com.
All right.
From the awesome knife company, LT Wright Knives out of Ohio. They make the knife for me. And then I'll use pruners, handheld pruners for harvesting materials sometimes. For fine basketry work, like cedar baskets. I actually have a little basketry toolkit made out of cedar. And in this,
Okay, hold on just a second. Looks like we're freezing up a little bit again. Check in on Dustin. How's it coming, Dustin?
Well, this will be something we can pitch back to Carleigh when she comes back. So one thing that we're kind of jumping all over the place, but one thing she was talking about is harvesting some of those, I don't know, kind of briars and things. And so one of my questions was, what kind of parts can you use? So we've talked about willows, using the full willow. You can use branches. You can use, like she was saying, these vines. I think you can use roots as well. And then I was playing around with the, because of my willow is just breaking, when I try to bend it into shape, it just breaks right in half. So and when I broke it, the bark started coming off. So I was like, well, I can still probably, the bark is still very, very pliable. So started actually making the cordage out of the branch. I mean, out of the bark itself. So that could be another way to even get it, not just to make cordage, but you can make this into the basket itself as well. You could weave this into being the basket fiber. So that's where I'm at on that.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Looks like she dropped out altogether, so that storm must be getting pretty big. So we need to stand by while we get her tied back in here. Anybody got any questions? Now's the time to get them queued up as we get Carleigh reconnected.
Hey, Dustin.
Yes, sir.
You took her class at the last gathering, I think. Nick, did you take
yeah.
class?
Yeah, we did. Actually, Noelle took the class too.
Yeah.
And she's gonna go get her basket that she did with Carleigh. It's the same one that Carleigh was showing off earlier. But from start to finish, we got to make these baskets. So Noelle made this one.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Heck yeah. I hate that I still have yet to ever take any of our classes at any event, but that would be definitely the one that I really want to take. So Jessica, my wife, loves that. I'm looking to see, I know my mom made one when she was there too. I'm looking to see if hers is here or not, but
yeah, I'm pretty sure I used mine that I made with her as a Mother's Day gift after I went home.
You're so smart.
Oh, can I see that actually? Yeah, actually, I gave it to my niece and nephew for Easter. Thought it was a perfect little Easter basket, but my nephew ended up turning it into a helmet. He wears this all around the house all the time. It's a helmet now. Yeah. One thing, I guess, we were talking about materials earlier, and Carleigh was talking about harvesting materials. But sometimes when you're trying to get into a project at first, it's overwhelming, all the different things you got to do. And sometimes what I found, at least learning, is to cheat, to purposefully cheat and not overwhelm yourself with so many variables. So for instance, if you're going to try to start a friction fire for the first time, you've never done a friction fire, go on eBay or find a friend who will give you a bow drill set that it will work, right? That will work, and you can get down the technique before trying to get all the other variables squared away. And I think the same thing can be said with basketry. So with this basket, for example, has some natural materials here, but this stuff I think we got from Hobby Lobby. I think she got this. This is some type of material you can get from Hobby Lobby. It comes in long strips. There's a couple different things that I think she'd got in Hobby Lobby or whatever your hobby shop is. So instead of making this hard on yourself, and you think I'm gonna go make a basket, you go collect a bunch of willow, and the willow is still green and it's not right, and you get disheartened because it doesn't work. Make it, maybe cheat a little bit by just going and buying the materials, things that will work, and then work from there. I think is one little trick that Carleigh is actually even mentioned in her classes before. It's one of my takeaways.
Oh, absolutely. Hopefully when she comes back here too, she can show us a little bit more of the different things that she's made on alone. I remember there are a few things that we have not seen yet today, but she showed us at our last live video that we did back in March with her. But that's some of the coolest stuff. The actual things that she made while doing nothing for 86. How many days? Oh, there she is.
Days, yeah.
That's insane. Hey, you're back.
Hey, Carleigh.
Our time doesn't work.
Hey, Carleigh. So while you were gone, I just kind of mentioned something. I'm wondering if you'll piggyback on it. I use piggyback in a group setting. That's like a day of these like Zoom meetings or whatever. Is I was talking about earlier that sometimes when learning a new skill, and this came from your class too, that sometimes it's overwhelming when you are trying to do everything, and there's a couple of variables that sometimes doesn't work. Like when Dustin goes out and collects the willow, and the willow is breaking. Well, I could easily become frustrated that, this is not going to work. And I put down basketry and I never pick it back up again. So when we took your class, we actually used, and probably just for practical purposes too, because you could get enough materials, you didn't have to go collect all yourself. This is kind of Hobby Lobby stuff. So taking away some of those variables, and not only do you teach basketry, but you also are in a friction fire and stuff. So like getting into a skill, take away the hard variables that might not work out for you. Go buy something that will work, and then, learn how to make the basketry. And then you can go collect the stuff, and you can kind of branch out, pun intended, and get weird with it.
Yes, I definitely agree that sometimes the massive amount of variables can be really overwhelming when you start to learn something new. And I think it's also an area as a society that we could really grow in, that just experimenting and being curious about something and not knowing how it's going to turn out and just going for it. So definitely if you find yourself frustrated and it's just like hanging, it's not working for you, or you just don't have access to anything that you think might work, sure, go to your local Hobby Lobby or basketry store, or even you can order online that cane material, which is what I sometimes teach my basket classes with, and that's what Dustin showed there. Very accessible, and then you can use that for every part of this basket. Or you can go and harvest some hoops out of a flexible branch. And willow's a great one. I also just went in my backyard. I'm honestly not sure what this tree is, but it's extremely flexible. And when testing for materials, flexibility sometimes is there, but it needs support. So if you just take a branch and you just bend it, it's gonna break. But if you take the branch and you put your hands along it and you slowly bend it, you're going to be giving it some support. And then you can also feel when those fibers are starting to like crackle a little bit, and you can pause and hold it there so that you can then like work up the other side and start looping it around to make a hoop.
It's a great tip.
So that's an important part about making hoops, and especially with working with some of the woodier species like willow or other branches. They are prone to breaking if you just bend them real quick.
Well, it looks like we've got about 25-ish minutes left. So did you have some other stuff in store? Are you going to show a demo? What you got in mind for us?
I was going to show my basket kit, toolkit, which I think where I cut out last. For some of my finer baskets, cedar baskets, I have these really just simple kitchen paring knives that are really thin, and that's great for thinning down materials or splitting them in half. I have a awl, which is useful for making space and putting in new materials. I have this little packing tool for the use of this is to like literally pack the material down tighter as you're going. And then in a basket, like one of my cattail baskets here, when you're working with a material and it's twisted up and you're twining with it, if you are having trouble getting it in, or you're trying to like tuck in the end pieces, just a simple of steps are helpful for grabbing materials and poking them through. And then for projects, to start projects, I've got these little clips. You can also use clothespins if it's a bigger project, and that will like hold the edges and materials together when you're first starting. So not necessary to have any tools besides a good knife. You know, a good knife is always helpful.
Did you make that container that your tools are in as well?
I did. It's a plated cedar bark basket.
Nice. It's like a basket trapper keeper.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hey, Carleigh.
Yeah.
Really quick, how long did you let the cedar dry for? I don't remember.
I let it dry at least 6 months.
Okay.
And that's from the initial harvest and like the wider strips just folded, wrapped up together. And then I'll soak it, and then I'll pull it through a leather lace stripper. So it's this little machine, not machine, but you clip it to your table, and you can put in razor blades at different increments to make different width materials.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
It's really handy for cedar baskets.
That kind of reminds me, remember Dan and Brenda? He showed us, I think you may have been at the house after the gathering, the technique of using like a 2-liter bottle, plastic bottle, and with a little razor blade and using those plastic strips. So theoretically, you could do this with, you know, like a 2-liter bottle if you strip that down, right?
Definitely. You can make baskets out of plastic. You can make them out of wire. And literally any materials you have on hand, you could turn into baskets.
That's so cool to have a basic fundamental skill like that you can just apply. Is essentially just your imagination limits its use.
Definitely. Your imagination is the limit. I wanted to share a couple of baskets that I made while surviving in Patagonia to show some of the ways, techniques that I've used in the past, I modified to use with the materials on hand. Notably, so it was going into winter, and I knew that snow was coming, or likelihood of snow was coming, and the edible plants I was harvesting daily were going to be covered in snow. And I needed something to dry them in so that I could store them for later. And the materials I had on hand down there were these rushes growing in the lake and a bamboo-like grassy material. And so I used the bamboo, which wasn't terribly flexible, but I used it for the supports or the structure of my basket. And then I used the flexible bulrush material to tie it all together. So either one of these materials on their own wouldn't have made a great basket that was super durable and strong. But using the qualities of each, I was able to balance it out and make a basket that I could hang over my fire to dry out the plants I was harvesting for later use. And I'd never made a basket like this one before. So adaptability in your materials, and then also your imagination and what do you need.
That's super cool.
Yeah. And then, survival baskets I was showing can be pretty rough and tumble. Here's some survival baskets I've made that, they're not the most beautiful thing to look at, but they're both very usable. If you have more time and you're able to let your materials dry out ahead of time, you can make really beautiful survival baskets.
And so that one looks like it has a flat side to hang up against the wall. Is that the intent?
Yes. So I wanted to have a basket to hold my tinder material for starting fires. And because I had walls in my shelter, I wanted to be able to hang it. And a traditional ribbed basket that's, round on both sides isn't going to hang very well. And so I modified it to have a flat back to hang.
And when you say inside your shelter, you mean inside the giant basket you were living in?
Yes. I hung my basket on my basket wall.
Baskets in baskets.
Yeah. So a tip for this style basket in general is to always try to squeeze in more materials, because even if you dry it ahead of time and you rehydrate it, it's going to shrink a little bit as it dries. So I was constantly like pulling this apart and weaving in more materials into the middle, to the point that it's still very tight. And that just makes it last longer and less likely to break.
Are there any grasses you recommend?
I don't have any particular grass to recommend. Grasses I have made coiled baskets out of, using yarn to tie the layers together as I coiled it. Again, like dry out the grass first and then rehydrate it to use would be my recommendation.
And Carleigh, on that topic of different materials, and this kind of happened when your thing shut off. We started talking about my willows that didn't really work out. But so, for instance, with the willows, like they're not really working, but I was able to take the bark off and braid those into a cordage, and the cordage could be made into a basket. But right before you got cut off, you were also showing that you kind of got some, not greenbrier or anything, but it was some kind of like ivy or something.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, there's
a poisonous variety.
Not poisonous, the English ivy.
But just as far as materials, like we started, a lot of that is very woody behind you, and we talked about willows, but from roots all the way up to branches, it seems, and everything in between, the bark, the inner bark, the outer bark. If you can create that kind of characteristic, you can make it work, I guess, huh?
Yes. Yeah, you're looking for flexible, long material. So whatever that is, I mean, baskets were made all around the world. So just because you don't have willow growing where you are, just because you don't have cattails growing or cedar bark, you're going to have some kind of material that was used for baskets.
Now, back on the topic of the grass, I know you said trees, when you get the bark layers or any of the branches or things off trees, you want to get them while the sap's running because the structure is different. Do you think there's a difference if you just harvested some of the dead grass at the end of the season and tried to rehydrate it?
My experience with harvesting dead materials is they're usually pretty brittle. So it's ideal, like if you harvest cattails in the winter when they're already brown, chances are that they're going to be very brittle and just break no matter how careful you are with them.
Okay.
It's better to harvest grasses or cattails kind of mid to late summer when they're still green and fresh, and then cut them and stand them up in a corner or hang them in your garage and let them dry out.
Awesome. Great information.
Can you expedite the process of drying by like blowing air over it or direct sunlight?
For sure. Blowing air across it would help dry things out quicker. Direct sun, I wouldn't necessarily recommend because, well, it depends on what you want to use it for. But direct sun is going to bleach out the color of your material. So if you want your basket material to stay green, having it out of the direct sunlight is going to help with that. And it'll still fade over time, but it will stay greener than it would otherwise.
Awesome.
Yeah. trying to think what else.
Also, Carleigh, when you were talking about drying things earlier, you're talking about the cedar, using the cedar and wrapping it into circles. Do you also try to create a memory? When you store stuff for the drying and the curing process, are you trying to store it round in a shape or anything like that?
Other than cedar, I try to keep things tall, so to speak. Like, I'm not going to wrap up cattails. Cedar I do because it makes it easier to soak it later on. You know, if you've got a bundle this wide, it's easier to put that in the sink or in a tub to soak, versus if you've got this really long, stiff piece of bark that's 20 feet long, how are you going to prepare that later on? Cattails, if it's like a hot summer day and I want to use them, I'll just stick them in the shower and spray them for like 5 minutes with shower water, and then they'll be ready to use. If it's sprinkling outside, like it is this morning, I put this bundle of cattails outside and it's ready to go. It's passing the finger test. It's just moist enough that it'll bend, but water's not squeezing out of it.
And back on the topic of the bark again, you said when people go to harvest it, we don't want to kill the trees necessarily. So you said narrow strips and peel vertically up the tree, but how much of the bark around, like no more than a quarter of the tree, an eighth, like where would you stop?
I would go for like an eighth of the bark.
Okay.
A quarter of the tree is going to be a lot of that tree. So about a quarter is what I'd go for.
Yeah.
So trees that have usable inner bark, and just experiment with them. So I see Steve asked or commented that he dries out his stinging nettles first before making into cordage. And yeah, that's what I do too. Stinging nettles or dogbane or milkweed are all great plants for cordage. And then you can make really intricate twine baskets out of them. My Sally bags actually are a twined basket that used to be made from all natural materials like dogbane or willow bark or nettles. And they were twined into intricate patterns. This style of basketry I learned from kind of the interior people of Washington and Oregon state. Although recently I've seen some displays of like this style of basketry up in the Adirondack area. So different styles of basketry were everywhere. They just use different materials.
And is it true that with the twine style that they were able to get them so tight that they would be able to hold water?
It's a good question. I believe it's often more of the coiled baskets that were the waterproof ones that were cooked in than the twined ones. So.
Pretty impressive to be able to get anything even close to watertight by just taking a bunch of individual strands and weaving them back together.
Yeah, it definitely is like part of the material too. Like my cedar hat, when it's dry out, it has little holes between all of the layer, all the weavings. But in the rain, that material swells up and makes it waterproof. So waterproof baskets are like a combination of how you weave it and then also the material and its ability to swell up and seal itself closed.
Well, and I see you had some materials there in front of you, didn't you?
I did.
What you got there?
I have some cattails, and I was going to show just like a basic square start.
Let's do it. I think people would love to see it.
Let's see if I can make this happen. And then if people have questions along the way, or you guys want to talk, go for it.
Yep. We'll let you know here. We've got about 10 minutes left, just as a time check for people.
Okay.
And if you want to talk, Carleigh, something you could talk about is, outside the very, very extreme practicality of baskets, I know that you have a lot deeper meaning that baskets have brought to your life. And you've talked about that in different ways. I don't know if you wanted to discuss that and why get into basketry and how many the different philosophies and concepts of life that you've drawn out of it.
That's a good question.
Is that too deep? Is it too far?
What's that? My philosophy of basketry is basically that we're in basketry, you're making a container, and you can also view your life as weaving your container of life. And like, how do you want to do that? And are you able to hold both pressure and tension in a way that's useful, and you can create a container that will help you hold what you want to in life.
Thank you for that, Carleigh. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's really fun when you actually get to have hands-on and you're making a basket, and you're making a basket for the first time, and you run into frustrations. And if you're able to like take a breath and step back from that, you might be able to learn something about yourself and what's going on in your life based off of your interaction with trying to make a basket. So I have here just some like 1.5 foot long.
Sorry, I was going to chime in, but I was still on mute. Steve was asking if you get into any of the heavy bark baskets.
What do you mean by heavy bark? Like folded bark?
I would assume similar to like poplar. I know you can peel that bark and then kind of stitch it back together a little bit and make somewhat of a bark basket. More of a container, I guess, a bark container.
Yeah, so I do make some folded bark baskets. I've made them out of cedar bark, tulip bark, maple. I like the process of weaving materials together, so I don't do a lot of that style basketry, but it's a really serviceable, quick way to make a basket. So
and since we've been interrupting you, it looks like you're just going every other one, weaving one through at a time.
Yes. Can you? I don't know how well you can see that.
Yeah, it looks pretty good from here.
Cool. So I've got 5 strands kind of horizontally orientated, and then I'm weaving in the vertical ones, and I'm lifting up a couple at a time, in this case 3, and pulling them backwards to pull the last one tight, and then to make room for this next one to set in. And this is a stage where kind of some of the finer points of checker weave is I'm pushing it in, and I'm also lifting up on the material a little bit and pulling it across. If I don't do this, it's going to immediately have holes between all the pieces, which will mean for sure holes in the end product at your base.
And it looks like there's a little bit of finesse there too. Once you get everything laid back flat, you're kind of squeezing it all back flush.
Yes. It's a constant looking at all of the pieces and adjusting it as you go. And this style you can use with anything, any material that's flat and has a little bit of width to it. So there's a square base. Let's see. Next, I'm going to take a piece of cattail and just twist it. And I'm not making a reverse wrap cordage. I'm just twisting it to make it round. And then I can hook this onto one of the flat weavers. And then I can start twining, which is just the process of taking turns with the twining material and going behind the next spoke. And then pulling down to keep it tight.
Steve's excited to have you come up to Ohio and teach a class. He wants to go to one of your classes.
Awesome, Steve. I'm looking forward to being able to teach in person again. It was sad that a couple of classes had to get canceled this spring. On that note, when we are able to have classes in person again, I do travel. Primarily, I'm traveling on the East Coast these days. However, yeah, I'm open to travel, and we'll travel and teach groups of people in different areas. So if you've got 10 people who are interested in a class, I would be happy to coordinate with you and travel up and teach a class somewhere.
And where should they reach out to you to do that? Through your website?
Through my website, through any of my social media. I'm just Carleigh Fairchild across all of the platforms. And that would be a great way to get in touch with me. So as I'm weaving this, something you may notice is I keep turning the materials. And that's so that I'm always working in a way that I'm able to pull towards me to tighten. If I didn't turn it, I would have to like twist myself around the materials, which would make it difficult.
So when things get bound up and complicated in your basket of life, approach it from a different perspective.
That's a great way of putting it. Definitely. If you're feeling stuck, adjust your perspective or your position and see what you might discover.
Jonathan Frisbee's curious how many students you'd need to host a class in Minnesota.
Specifically, I mean, my general is 10 people. Minnesota would be a little farther away, so maybe like 10 to 15 people.
Or one really rich guy willing to spend money.
Or that. You know, I also do some public speaking, so if a couple of things could get coordinated, that definitely makes it more, makes me more able to travel. Yeah.
And Dustin, I know Carleigh had given you some books earlier. Do you want to share those right now so people have that as a resource as well?
Sure. Let's see. I'll just post them up for just a split moment, going through the little tabs just so you can kind of see them. Carleigh, can you see the screen right now? Or no? Are you doing your thing?
I can see it.
Okay, cool. I'm just going to post them up real quick. We won't have to, I know you're getting, it looks like you're getting back to where you started, so we're getting that spot. All right, so some of the books that Carleigh's recommended earlier, if you didn't see it, she recommended Cedar, The Tree of Life, the Northwest. That's obviously specifically about cedar. She also recommended, she hasn't recommended it yet, but she recommended previous to this book as well, the Handmade Basket book by Rebecca Board. There's only a few left, so if you want to go snag it, you got to go right now.
We're only seeing the cedar one right now.
Oh, okay. Man, let me, okay. It only does each tab, so let me switch that. Let me do that too.
I could also hold up the book.
Oh. Let's do that thing.
This book is great because it has really great pictures and diagrams.
I love pictures in books. I'm one of those people.
Yep.
Especially for baskets. Can you imagine a text-heavy book in basketry?
Then you go over this one and under that one.
Yeah. The basket book is a great one for if you want to buy some reed or cane material. This one has a lot of baskets with those materials in them. A little bit more like Appalachia style is a lot of the reed baskets. And again, it has great pictures of how to weave things together.
Oh, wow.
I'm going to go ahead and post links to Amazon for those folks that are right now in the comment section of YouTube and in Facebook.
Yeah. So I see our time is up, but just wanted to show the base here. Simple twining going around it. And then the next step would be to just fold up the edges, and I could continue twining, or I could go back to plating and do a checker weave pattern back and forth and make a pattern with this basket.
And so what is the purpose of adding the twine in there? It just helps reinforce the bottom as opposed to just trying to bend it and continue plating?
Twining helps it helps the basket stay together. Like, it provides that stability of form, and then it allows you to transition. So twining is a good transition weave, both from the base to the sides. And then when you're doing the sides, I have 2 rows of plating and then 1 row of twining. And that's because the plating, all the materials will want to kind of still spread apart, and the twining hold them together.
And that was all cattail that you used, correct?
Yes.
That's cool.
So cattail's renewable basketry material, grow fresh every year. If you live around them, there's a lot of them. So they're a great material to harvest this summer, dry it out, and then start playing around with it. Very versatile.
Oh,
Starting to break up a little bit again, but that's all right, because I think this will wrap it up for us here. Yeah, I hope this gets people interested in the world of basketry and weaving and all the potentials involved in that, whether it's, you know, an emotional, spiritual type journey, or even just trying to make a practical container. It's pretty amazing the wide spectrum of things that you can create out of this seemingly simple skill. But yeah, it comes with practice and the ability that she was able to go that fast. I think it only took like 10 minutes to make that base. The rest of us would have probably still been fumbling and pieces falling all over the place. So it's really neat to see. Thank you so much for being here with us, Carleigh.
Thank you so much. And yeah,
thanks, Carleigh.
Anybody, go out, experiment, remember to breathe, and have patience, and just keep at it.
And if you do, make sure you reach back out to Carleigh on social media or through her website and share pictures of what you created from learning this skill, because the series is all about passing on skills and getting people involved and interactive. So definitely go keep an eye on Carleigh's stuff, interact with her, let her know if you have questions in regards to your baskets, and keep sharing the knowledge.
Yeah, pass it along, share it with some kids.
All right, Dustin and Casey, you got anything else?
You can reach out to me.
I appreciate it, Carleigh, and hopefully we'll see you in the fall if we're back to normal.
We'll be there.
We'll see all of you guys there, hopefully.
All right. Well, on Thursday, we've got a wildlife tracking class with Bo Harger down here in Southeast Texas. And he's one of the ones that helped us design the tracking bandana. So we'll have him on here teaching us some of the fundamentals and basics behind wildlife tracking. So if you're interested in that, swing back and check out that video, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.